A lot of talk today about a revived government plan to drug test welfare recipients. A few groups are opposed to this. The government trying again after it couldn't get support back in 2017. And joining me now is Social Services Minister Anne Ruster to talk through some of the details. Thanks very much for your time, Minister. Let's start with some of your colleagues' suggestions. They'd be happy to be drug tested themselves. Would you consider putting this into the bill that politicians get drug tested?
Well, I mean, obviously it's not my place to make a comment on your station this afternoon as to relation to whether we should, politicians should be drug tested. But as I've already said today, I'll be more than happy to be tested.
But obviously it'd need to be formalised in some way. Is that something that's on the table as you're negotiating this bill?
Well, I mean, obviously I'm happy to have that discussion with my colleagues and those on the other side and those on the crossbench. But, it's something that's been raised today during the media. I've said, as a number of my colleagues have also said, that they'd be happy to be drug tested. But I think that's about as far as it can go today.
All right, fair enough. We might keep compiling that list. Let's just step by this policy then. The trial would randomly select people. Is that of any age, and does the government pay for all of the drug tests?
Yes, the government will be paying for both of the tests, the first test and a subsequent test if the person tests positive on the first test. And it's only for new recipients of working age payments, Newstart and Youth Allowance. So people who are currently on either of these payments won't be part of the random sample through which we'll draw to do the tests. It'll only be new people coming on to Newstart.
But it could be, say, a 58-year-old who's a new recipient of Newstart. There's no age cap?
No, it'll be random test. We don't believe that drugs discriminate. If somebody has got an issue with a drug addiction, we would like to identify that drug addiction and to work with them and assist them to deal with the issue and hopefully get them off that particular drug, because people who have drug addictions are not work ready, and we want to make sure that every Australian who's on a working age payment is as work ready as they possibly can be, and this is one of those measures amongst a number of measures that the federal government's putting on the table as ways that we can break down the barriers for people who are currently unemployed to make sure that they're ready to get back into work.
So the system is one positive test, they get a counselling session. At that stage, they no longer have that requirement to show they're looking for work. Is that accurate? No,
the first, if they test positive on the first test, we will seek for them to go onto an income management regime where 80% of their payment will be quarantined and not be accessible in cash. So that means that they won't be able to access things like alcohol, obviously turn it into cash, which is the currency of drug dealers, and buy drugs, and also to gamble with it. There will be 20% available in cash for the necessities that sometimes people do need cash for. They will continue to be required to undertake the same sort of mutual obligations that they currently are under their agreements in relation to their being job ready. If they fail a second test, then part of that could be that their mutual obligations are reduced, changed or even removed whilst they undertake the necessary rehabilitation to deal with their drug dependency.
And presumably that reason is they're spending many more hours at that stage on working on their drug dependency, so you remove that other requirement, because some people would say, well, at that point they're on these payments and no longer required to show they're out there trying to get a job. But you're saying the focus then is rehabilitation.
Absolutely. If somebody turns up with 2 consecutive drug tests that are positive in the 25-day period, we think that is a very sure sign and signal that they need some assistance to deal with their problem.
What about if someone fails again and again and again? 20 failed drug tests in a row. At any stage would they have payments reduced?
Well, we're seeking to only undertake 2 tests. Once the person has gone through and failed or were tested positive on the second test, they would then become part of the rehabilitation system, which would include a whole heap of supports and services to assist that person. So once they've actually got to that stage, then there would be an individualised service and identify the individual needs of that particular person, because no 2 people are necessarily presenting with the same problem, or necessarily no 2 people were going to require the same treatment to deal with that problem.
So after those first 2 tests, though, they go through that program, and if they've finished that program, do they get tested again? Do they go back into that testing process?
Well, the program is only operating for 2 years, the trial. So during that period, people don't come off, drug addiction and substance abuse very quickly. We would be seeking to remain working with that person to get them through a reasonably long period of rehabilitation, which could take many, many months or possibly even years. So I don't want to make comments about individual cases, but there is no intention to go back to the drug testing. But of course, we would be working with whatever mechanisms and services that we can, because we certainly don't want somebody who has gone through all of the hard work of dealing with their drug addiction and becoming clean, and then to see them return back to their old drug ways. So there are other programs and other ways in which we would deal with that. This simply is a one positive. Right. We'll seek to use income management, and second positive, we will seek to put you into. But
there's no point at all along the path whether or not you pull out, for example, of a program that's supposed to get you off drugs, a rehabilitation program. If you pulled out of that program, for example, could you then lose payments? Is there any possibility if someone's not playing ball on this, they get payments reduced?
Look, absolutely. If people are not prepared to deal with their drug addiction, they cannot continue to expect that the taxpayer of Australia will continue to pay them a welfare payment if they're not doing anything to deal with it. But what we would say is that we're going to put everything we possibly can, make everything available to those people so that they do have the resources. But at the end of the day, this is about making sure that we put the right encouragements in place for people to get themselves job ready, or if they are unable to do that in the first instance, to deal with their barrier, in this instance drug addiction, so that they can. But at that point,
so they're offered that program after the second failure test. If they don't complete that program, if they pull out of it, then there could be a trigger there. What's the exact trigger for them having reduced payments or cut off altogether?
Look, we're going to deal with this once people go into the treatment program. It will be dealt with on a case-by-case basis, but there could be, and probably, could be a situation where somebody, if they refuse to continue with their treatment, refuse to address their drug addiction, that their payments could be suspended or reduced.
All right. I want to ask you just quickly as well about Newstart, the government not budging on increasing this payment. What makes you so sure, you're a relatively new minister in this area, that this is the right amount? Can you cite evidence for its current level on this being the right amount?
Well, one of the things that we've been really clear about right from the get-go is that government has a greater responsibility than just providing a safety net payment to people who are unemployed. We need to create jobs, and I think we've got a pretty good track record of that. We need to create pathways to jobs. But the thing that has probably become most evident to me in the short time that I've been the Social Services Minister is that there are many, many different barriers to people being able to get into work. I mean, today we're talking about one of them, which is drug addiction, but there are many, many more. And I think it's incumbent on government to actually identify what all those barriers are and then work in proper niched ways to deal with those barriers, because we're not going to get people the opportunities that we want to get them unless we can get them into work.
But obviously one barrier is having the right resources, including a payment that allows someone to look for work, perhaps work on a CV, perhaps buy a new suit, whatever it might be. What evidence can you cite that the Newstart amount is set at the right level for that?
Well, there's two things there. Firstly, there are very, very few people who only receive the base level of Newstart. Just about everybody else, everybody receives additional payments. I think it's about an average of $130
The majority of them, though, are only getting the
average
energy supplement. So it's only a touch above Newstart, the average payment.
Oh, there is a wide range. I said it averages at 130, and you rightly point out that some will be getting less and some will be getting more, and that's part of our welfare system, is making sure that we target the payments to the area of need. But the other thing that I would also say is that this is not meant to be a wage or a salary replacement. It's about giving people a safety net, but also to work with them on a myriad of different programs to get them work ready. And one of the things you did mention was about working on their CV or maybe getting them a suit so that they can turn up to a job interview. These are the very things that the programs that are currently in place, and we want to continue to work with people.
Right, but there doesn't seem to be anything out there.
I
guess the question as well is, so we're nearly out of time, Minister, but is it worth looking at something that looks at all the payments, how much they are, and how much would be the best amount to get someone back into work? Why not have at least a look into that, an inquiry?
Well, currently the Senate is inquiring into working age payments. That inquiry was set up in the last couple of weeks that the Parliament sat. But what I would say is that it is absolutely incumbent on us as government to not take a one-size-fits-all approach in relation to assisting people to deal with barriers. We need to identify those barriers and then target the problems to make sure that we can deal with those. Because, as I said, unless we can break those barriers down, people are not going to be able to get a job.
Social Services Minister Anne Ruston, appreciate your time today. Thank you.
My pleasure.